Chris and Dan show. Chris thinks it's not okay to explore other ideas and alternatives.
When did I say that?
What did you say?
So I said we were not recording yet. You had mentioned the Luciferian motto is to build upon a lie and do not allow alternative thought. And I said you're describing the Democrat Party because that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, the Luciferian. Don't have the quote exactly. I'm not a Satanist, but the quote is something along the lines, or their motto is something along the lines of everything that I know is all that I need to know,
Right.
which is a very evil premise and a very evil foundation and a framework to build upon.
And that's exactly what the Democratic Party does as a whole, because as soon as you question their beliefs, if it's not something they're prepared to answer, they just start yelling at you. Opposed to, at least what I see,
I agree. I agree, but I don't think it's exclusive to them.
but generally speaking, when you do the same thing to a Republican or somebody who's conservative, I don't like to use the word Republican because I don't agree with Republicans.
Well, you just use Democrat, so you got to argue on the same playing field.
But the problem is the Democrats do group as a whole, in my opinion. And they have further leftists, but they always come back to establishment
I
Democrats.
don't know. There's a lot of Democrats this year that are not for what's going on right now. So
okay, fair enough.
I would not turn Luciferian in your statement.
Okay, fair enough. But I would say even those leftists do the same thing. Leftists, Democrats, they do not want to argue with you if they don't have a sound rebuttal. They'll just start yelling at you, calling you names. Right. Whereas I don't think conservatives or Republicans, for the most part, do that. They'll say, okay, well, I need to consider that. They don't start yelling at you and calling you names. They say, I didn't consider that. I need to think about that. And that's exactly what I do.
Well, the conservatives, but there's factions of the conservative party that are alt-right, and there's factions of the Democratic Party that are leftist.
Okay, define alt-right.
Xenophobic, white nationalist.
And what percentage of the party do you think that is?
Less than 5, maybe 5.
I would say it's like 10,000 people, honestly. Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, where do you get those numbers from?
I don't see it. That's why I'm saying it. I see it all the time on the left, though.
But do you not see it, or do you not look for it? Because there's a difference.
Well, both. I don't really look for it, but I don't see it either.
Because let's not bring up, you're supposed to be way better well-versed in this stuff than me. Mm-hmm. And you didn't know. You were surprised to know that half of the states outlaw abortion.
It's more than that. It's like 28.
So, we just get fed what our party, the talking points, and then that becomes a framework for our life. And then we start seeing everything through that lens, and we get blind, and this is the Luciferian principle.
Well, to be fair, I think Lucifer is very much for abortion.
Right. The logic or the framework of that philosophy is don't worry about exploring alternatives. What you know is all you need to know.
Fair enough, but I think abortion's a horrible argument in that context because
sure. But the point of that is you're not informed of what the other side's even complaining about.
Sure, but the thing is if you want to take abortion up, I'm happy to see 28 states that have a completely outlawed it. I think
you would want all 50.
Yeah, I think
I would want all 50 to legalize it, but I'm personally against it.
Well, so see, I categorize abortion as murder, and
I do too.
If you're gonna say murder is illegal, then it's illegal in all instances. Therefore,
I do too. But pregnancy is, oh man, this is a deep one because I'm not for abortion. Morally, I don't think I would ever do it, but I do think it should be the woman's choice. And I don't think the state should be involved.
So then it should be a woman's choice when the child is 3. Why not?
There has to be a line drawn somewhere. There should be a limit when the fetus is not viable. It should be okay.
The fetus is not viable after birth.
24 weeks. 24 weeks is when the fetus can survive outside the
okay, but it cannot survive when born. So what the hell's the difference? It cannot survive. No, it cannot. It still needs a person. It still needs a person to take care of it.
Sure, but it can survive on its own.
No, it
provided
cannot.
it's nourished and
Provided its needs are met
right. It's
by
not gonna
another.
die
By
on
another, just like when it's in the womb. Just
yeah.
like when it's in the womb. So there is no difference. You're drawing lines that do not exist, in my opinion. It's still murder. It's still murder whether it's in the womb, it's murder if it's outside the womb.
It's yeah, I would agree it's murder. Inside the womb, I definitely agree it's murder outside the womb.
Yeah. So I don't see. You have to redefine murder, in my opinion, to allow abortion.
I do think there is something of women's choice, and since we've given that right to women where they are considered equal citizens, which there's an alarmingly growing and alarmingly strong faction on X from the right that want to take rights away from women, even voting, even and not joking either. Like they're being serious. So you asked for examples of alt right. There's more.
Well, I guess maybe then I'm all right because
Chris
I
just
don't.
got canceled.
I don't think women should have the right to abortion. Doesn't matter that I'm not a woman. It's just like I don't think many things that I have no context of being or
Right,
framework for being shouldn't be allowed. Um,
right.
I
It
don't
is
think you,
murder. I agree with you. It is murder.
I don't think men should be allowed to rape children. Right? That's not
Completely
something
agree.
I've ever done.
Completely agree.
I've never been a woman either. I don't think you should be allowed to murder your child. You have
I
women.
I agree. You shouldn't. You. It is murder, but when it's still in your body, I think there should be a distinction, and that is where they have like the right to
Well,
their body and the state being involved. Again, if I had a daughter, I would never encourage her to have an abortion.
sure.
There are cases where you should, like life threatening for the mother, life threatening for the child. There are situations where rape, of course, but even beyond that, I do think it should be the women's choice. As appalled as I would be, and as bad as I personally think that is, I'm not the state, and I'm not in control of that woman's body.
So,
That's her choice.
I
And she's got to live with that the rest of her life. And most normal women, that's not an easy choice for them to make.
So I get the argument. I get it from a libertarian perspective, which I'm for the most part, just on this particular principle, I am not.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's fine. But my whole argument is not this is not an abortion thing. I just brought it up
no,
to
I
show
get it.
that because you study this stuff and you were not
No.
even aware because you're not looking for the
S-
other point's perspective.
So I don't know if I study it, but when I'm, because I do listen to a lot of political speech um, on not on mainstream media because it's all bullshit there. Um, when I hear something that doesn't sit right with me, I do look it up.
Right, but
Is this correct?
this abortion issue. So we're
I've never heard anyone say that it's illegal in 28 states. At last I heard it was like 3 states, Oklahoma and a couple others. Um, I didn't realize it was illegal in 28 states now. And in some instances, not all, most it's not the case, but in some instances it's even illegal in terms of rape, which even that I'm on the fence about. I understand it's a life. I just don't know how you sacrifice one life for the other.
yeah, and it's not a decision for the state. It should be a decision for the individual.
Because my logic says this: you as a woman, right? You decide who you're going to sleep with, and if you get pregnant, well, it was your option, your thought, your consent to having sex, which can
Right.
lead to
Right.
pregnancy to begin with. So if you remove that option and you're raped, well, that's a totally different story.
Right, but the point of this pod is to highlight how few people exist that truly, and not just say that they do, truly try to study alternatives to their own framework.
Oh, certainly,
Because
certainly.
once you get past a certain age, you don't want to hear anything beyond your framework. You're like horse with blinders on. You
Well,
don't
that's
care
see. I don't
what
know
the
if
other side thinks.
I I guess I tend to agree with that for the most part and most people, but I'm actually the opposite. I was way more conservative when I was younger, like way more. Like didn't even consider the alternatives. Now I do.
Well,
right?
and you're supposed to as you age.
Well,
Um,
no, I think most people don't, like you just said. I
no, but
think
you're supposed to. If
sure.
you start reading more, get new ideas, challenge your own frameworks. But how many people actually do that? They don't. What they use their spare time for is let's watch football, let's,
Well,
let's drink beer, and then you're in echo chambers
no
your
doubt.
entire life. Higher education was supposed to be challenging your ideas. Now it's been hijacked by the left, where they've basically hijacked people's mental models
Hmm.
and churn them out. But the right does it too, not with institutions, but the right does it with their own groups. It's just
Certainly,
decentralized.
certainly. And
Neither one is good. They're both Luciferian. They're both evil.
well, for me, the turning point in really considering other alternatives really was 9/11.
Mm,
For me, it was kind of opened my eyes to, because I've always been opposed to war. And it's like, well, why are we going to war in Iraq when they didn't have anything to do with 9/11?
Weapons of mass destruction, or what?
Well,
What were
well,
they
it
called?
just it just makes it, so long as you keep your eyes and ears open, you will see instances that it's like this just makes no sense, and
Right.
maybe I need to consider alternatives. And that's when the left was very much against war, and so it made me consider their perspective. And now I've completely flipped to what used to be the left, and now the left's on the right, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
I think Nietzsche said it. I've been into philosophy lately. Nietzsche, I think, with a kid on the way. I'm focused on teaching, hoping to one day teach him what to think, not how, or how to think, not what. But
well, as a parent, you also do that as well. What to
yeah,
think, but do consider, do be constructive.
well, you show them that through your actions, but you teach
Certainly.
them how to think.
Hmm.
Nietzsche said there's no such thing as free will, it's only degrees of strong or weak will.
Yeah, you texted that yesterday.
Yeah. And that thing stuck with me because it's kind of fits what I've always felt but didn't know how to describe. Like you and I have this debate about there are very little truths like that are known, both scientifically or philosophical. Like
Hmm.
everything we think it might be a truth, but it's really just a framework that is the ones that we consider truth are just strongly held framework, right?
Well, I mean, we could really go down a rabbit hole in regards
Freedom
to.
is one. Freedom is one.
So
Freedom
I
of will,
so freedom, I think, can very well be defined.
freedom
Um,
of will.
sure,
But
which
then you got Nietzsche brought this up. He asked freedom of will. Everyone says, "Yeah, I have freedom of will." He says, "No, you don't, because it's a." He said it's what did he call it? It's impossible to have freedom of will because the action of the will means you were obedient to something.
and I guess what he's saying there is you have constraints defined by culture or politics or
Yeah.
your
Yep.
acquaintances.
Yep. Or DNA.
Sure.
So it's an illusion, but it's a strongly held illusion versus a weakly held
Which,
one, which is like the abortion one. That's a weakly held one. Like
well,
everybody's on kind of on shaky ground. There's no real way to say yes or no. You can argue both sides at some point in certain instances. But things like free will, it's supposed to be ingrained like, yeah, that's a universal truth. Not really.
so it's funny because free will really kind of goes back to religion to a degree. And we could go down that rabbit hole for 4 days probably.
Oh
But
yeah.
that being said, I mean, there's no way you can define for certain with any certainty that A, there's a God, and B, that any religion's particularly correct. Now, there's arguments you can make that I think, and this is true of most things, right? Where
Yeah.
you can't prove it, but you can make arguments that it strongly suggest. Right? It's just like
Yeah.
politically yesterday when I was texting you. I think the arguments I provided you, yeah, I can't prove any of that stuff,
Right.
but I do think they strongly suggest it's a possibility, a very likely possibility, just like God, just like any particular religion. The problem with, and I'll let you speak because I know you got a lot to say about this, but the
No.
the the, the problem with religion, particularly not God, but religion in particular, is okay. I'm a Christian. I approach God from a Christian perspective, so I'll safe in that regard. But one thing I take issue with is in which you have to believe Jesus Christ to go to heaven. Well, is it fair to Muslims, who there's just as many of them as there are
Slightly
Christians?
slightly less Muslim. I just saw this today, but
Okay,
they're
but it's
catching on
roughly the
fast.
same. It's
Al
roughly the same.
Almost.
Over a billion. Both have over a
Yeah,
billion.
yeah.
And why is it fair if somebody's been culturally raised to be Islamic to then condemn them to hell because they don't believe in the Christian faith? I
Correct.
just don't get that from a godly perspective, because how many Christians would, if for some reason there became some sort of kind of proof that Islam was the correct religion, how many Christians who've been raised to be Christian, believed to be Christian their entire life from birth, how many would convert to Islam? Not that many, I don't think. You've been subjected to this culturally and in all
Yeah.
capacities to believe it.
It's your
So
mental model that's very
y-
tough to break.
exactly, if you've been brainwashed, which I don't like to use the word brainwashed in terms
It's
of
not
religion,
brainwash because that would imply, it's being done intentional, and
but it is. But it
no,
is.
it may have
Oh,
been
it is.
created religions may have been created intentionally to do
No, no,
that, but
no. That's not what I mean. It is intentional, because I take my children to church every Sunday. It's intentional. I want them to
right,
believe this. So it is intentional. I just don't like the word brainwashing, but in effect it is.
right, and, I mean, Nietzsche was a big critic of everything. If you had to define him in one word, it's a skeptic,
Hmm.
and he actually predicted this is the decline of the West. And you and I have talked about it. You should read Nietzsche. He basically he was anti-church. He grew up in the church, but he became anti-church because he said the foundation of their obedience is their fear of hell, and he doesn't think that is a worthy foundation of a religion. If he believes in God, but he doesn't believe that God would have that as the foundation, fear. And the only reason why the majority are obedient is because of this fear. But he predicted, as science, because he grew up in the 1850s, right when the scientific revolution started challenging these frameworks.
Hmm.
The Earth is not the center of the universe. The Earth rotates. Science started deconstructing what religion taught to be true. So when people started questioning that, the numbers of the faith started decreasing, initially slowly,
Hmm.
but as science rapidly started advancing, and you see it now, just as rapid. And he predicts that's the end of Western civilization because, as much as he is anti religion, he believes it served the purpose. And you and I talked about this in the fact that it gave people meaning, because without meaning, you get nihilism and social justice, and you
Hmm.
start clinging on to other ideals, which are more man made, although religion's man made, but it's based in a spiritual foundation. But
So
communism, socialism, these are injustices, religions based around a antidote to injustice, which creates nihilism. And Jordan Peterson gets into this too. So
yeah.
even though he is a big skeptic of Christianity and all religions, but really Christianity because he grew up Christian, he said it did have its place, and he thinks the alternative might be worse, but it's necessary to get through because we're getting closer to the truth, even though it gets worse before it gets better. And
So
he
yeah,
predicted this.
sure. I disagree with that to a degree, and here's why. I You could start with the Constitution of the United States. I think you need a framework of rules that everybody works by. I think that is fair for all if you know the rules. But
Hmm.
when the rules are constantly changing, as would be in a secular society, it's not fair to anyone. Like literally no one, right? You need to know the rules. You need to know what you're playing by, as in any game. You play Parcheesi or poker. What's the rules, right? Then it's fair. If you make up the rules as you go, it's not
Hmm.
fair to anyone other than the one making up the rules. So you need to have a set of rules that you follow indefinitely in order
Well,
for
for
it to be
sure,
fair to
especially
all.
if you're building a country or trying to maintain a country and
But that's just one example.
trying to brainwash people to die for a flag.
Right. So I think the best set of rules, in my opinion, is the Constitution. And I think most countries agree with that. Most individuals in countries, though that they're
Yeah,
starting to be brainwashed otherwise, right?
it
First
should
Amendment's bad,
be.
Second Amendment's bad, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. But it
yeah.
used to be for a couple centuries, everyone desired to come to America, but now that's changing.
But
Um,
that's a micro example of this. The macro is like how we
Same
think
thing in
about life.
religion, though. Same thing with religion.
Yeah, or just life in general. I mean, we create like myths. So you could view the world, I think Jordan Peterson said it this way, and I'm probably butchering it, but the world is basically two things. It's a collection of things, the known, and it's a also the unknown, and in between is where we live. It's an arena for action, and action is motivated by ideas which are framed by thoughts and beliefs. So thoughts and beliefs create the world, the unknown. They make the unknown known over time.
Hmm.
And it's very important what kind of thoughts we have. And when institutions like we have now are shaping those thoughts, they're actually shaping the future world.
Oh, absolutely.
And so those things are not real until you create them, right? Like there are things that we know, and then there's the unknown, and we live in between in the theater. I think he calls it the theater of action or theater of activity or something. And that's where scientific progress and that's where selfishness needs to come in too, because the antidote to groupthink is selfishness, and you need a healthy balance of that. If you are looking for self-interest, which is Ayn Rand's arguments, like greed, not greed is good, but something about the virtue of selfishness. It's basically an antidote to groupthink, and you
Well,
can of course go too extreme with that, just like you can with anything in moderation. If you don't have any selfishness and just become a sheep of the group, you're shaping a world that you actually don't want. This
so
stuff gets deep, Chris.
sure.
Please
And
just don't be Luciferian. That's all I'm asking.
sure, you don't have a problem with you don't have to worry about that. So, see, I would expand upon the Ayn Rand concept to Orwell, and we're currently kind of living in that, right? Where established facts and truths are now being questioned, right?
Right. So don't you think that we should be more self-interested?
Well, so I really don't understand what's going on today. Oftentimes, I really don't. I don't understand.
Fair enough.
I seriously, I don't understand how concepts.
This is
Well,
the
they were
book actually. The Virtue of Selfishness,
okay.
written in the 30s or
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that one. You have something that's been known since the start of man for the most part and never questioned, now being questioned, right? What's a woman? What's a man? These are established truths and facts that should not be questioned, but now they are. And
and then but they argued that, well,
and
yes, we know.
That's what Orwell projected would happen
Yeah,
in
but what did they say?
1984.
They break it down because they say, well, we know the sex, but we don't, that
No,
is known,
at this
right?
point they're not even doing that. They're just saying even the sex is undefinable.
Well, you know the chromosomes, but you don't know
They
the gender or
they
something.
want on birth certificates undefined at this point, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because you can argue with what's known
No,
and what's unknown, but there are certain things that are known
but gender and
within
sex are the
science
same.
that
But
science
gender and
discovered.
sex are the same thing. They're the same thing. It's just a
Well,
way. It's just a way to implement
I
what
never understood
Orwell
the
wrote.
difference,
Well,
but
it's just a
I'm open. Look, if somebody presents data that shows that their gender is different from sex and they can show it empirically, I'm open to it. And this is where I try not to be Luciferian. Like, okay, show me. But right now it's just rhetoric, and because we said that's why. Well, I need to actually see studies being done,
Hmm.
I need to see peer reviewed, like chromosome XXXY. We found
Mm.
this a long time ago.
Yep.
And there's XXX, there's XYY, sure, but XX and XY are like the fundamental truths. We know that, male or female.
Well,
But the gender, I'm open to it if you show me something. I mean, maybe 100 years from now they find like, yeah, but there's a spectrum of gender. Okay, well, it ultimately still is male or female, but the sex, but okay, I can understand the spectrum. I'm not closed to that idea. I just haven't seen it yet, other than how people feel, which in a way you got to respect it too. Like, who
well,
am I to say what you feel more female than male today? Okay, go ahead.
so sure, but that doesn't make you the other. Is my point. This
No, but if
this
they
is
want to
in
feel
your
that
mind.
way, if they want to
Sure,
feel it, like, what does it bother me?
you can be one of them furries or whatever the hell they're called, and
Yeah, but
but
why would it
but
bother other people though? I mean,
it's in the same spectrum of, okay, I'm a cat today. Well, no, you're not, but we'll go ahead and play along with your delusion.
well, yeah, there are people that do say that. I mean, mental illness is real.
Yeah, and I would say that's true in terms of I'm not a man, I'm a woman.
Right.
I would say it's right in the same category personally. But
Yeah. Sex and gender, and I'm even okay if you can show me proof of that there is a spectrum on the gender. I'm okay with that. But I haven't seen those kind of things. I've just seen, this is what I feel.
yeah, it
This is how I feel.
goes back to Orwell. It absolutely does. Questioning known truths and making people believe otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, and I understand the argument. There are intersex, which I get that, but that would be like saying, well, first off, there's exceptions to all rules, right? That would
And
be like,
Orwell was also a socialist, which is ironic. Yeah,
right?
he wrote that book
You know,
basically mocking big government, which the socialists have become that now. The socialists used to not be that.
the point is, there's exceptions to all rules. That doesn't change the rule, though, in my
There's
opinion.
exceptions to rule, yeah, but there are new like categories that emerge. Like before, like chemistry or before physics, we didn't really know that atoms existed. And then there's probably smaller things than atoms. I think they're called quasars or something. So maybe they discover something along the lines of gender to add on to sex. But we haven't really got there yet. It's just like what people feel subjectively.
Well, I guess the example I would use is, can you define what a human is? If I were defining a human, I would start with their bipeds, right? Or bipods. I never forget the term. You know, they walk on two legs. Most animals don't.
What if they're
Or
born without legs, though?
exactly.
They're not
That
human.
doesn't change the fact that they're not a human if they're born with one leg or if they lose a leg or whatever. The point is there's exceptions to all rules, but generally speaking, humans are born with two legs and walk on two legs. Generally speaking.
Well, see, I would go further and say the self-awareness is what makes one human.
Okay, but that's kind of subjective uh, to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, you can measure it, but
I would want more of a physical characteristic that's personally right. And
then
I agree with
it's
what you.
not precise though.
I agree, and I do agree with your definition. Cognition is definitely part of being human, where many animals do not possess such a thing. I just think it's very subjective, right? That again, it's so hard to define things oftentimes
And it's
because,
similar to gender. It seems like it's subjective now.
well, but it's not, right? I'm just saying there are exceptions to all rules, and
So you
only
just said to be human is subjective.
no,
So
I'm
the
not
most
saying it's subject.
fundamental,
I'm not saying it's subjective. I'm not. I'm saying there's exceptions to rules, and there
right?
always
But you
is.
can't define what human is precisely.
Oh, I think you can. I mean,
You
you
couldn't. I can't, other
well,
than being self-aware.
I mean, there you could add a bunch of different things to the list, and which you could say not you need to meet 90%, say, right?
Yeah.
Or
All right. Let's analyze your genome, which science now can do it empirically and say, okay, this is DNA of a human.
exactly.
Well, we're not at that technological capability of, maybe we never will be, of analyzing gender to have like,
Well, again, gender's a made-up term. It-
yeah, but what if it's not? I'm just saying I'm open to the fact that it's maybe it's not. and we just can't measure it yet.
I mean,
Because I
there's
mean, I've not trans. I've never felt like I should be a woman. But if I ever did, I wouldn't want people to dismiss me and say, "No, you're a man. Shut the fuck up. Who cares how you feel?" I wouldn't want that. I'm a
well,
human being at the end of the day. Like, who are you to tell me how I should feel? No, you go shut the fuck up and do what you got to do. Leave me
no,
alone.
I
And
don't
I
just
feel the other side, and there's a lot of people being dismissive. You must be a man or a woman.
so
Okay, but what if there's this thing called gender that we don't know yet? And because you don't read books or do shit, you don't understand it. Like, people are gonna try to explore, and if it never is discovered, it's never discovered. But people have feelings, and that's all I'm saying. We need more tolerance for the
so
others different than us.
so I again I equate this to, let's, because it's the simplest example. Let's use schizophrenia. This
Hmm.
this schizophrenic sees another person that's not there
Yeah,
and argues with it. You're
has
walking
delusions.
you're walking with your child, and this person appears to be screaming at a tree as though it is talking to them, right?
Yeah,
Do you your child questions what's going on? Do you say this person's out of their mind right in front of them? No. You say nothing, usually, at least if I
yeah.
were
You
with that
get
child.
out of there.
You remove your child from the situation. Then you
Hmm.
explain to your child this person has a mental illness,
Yeah,
and it's not right to embarrass them or put them down.
yeah.
The exact same thing holds true in my mind for somebody who looks in a mirror and is obviously a man and sees a woman.
I would accept that because that's empathy. Now the problem is many on the right don't have that attitude. They make fun of them. They
Eh,
point fingers. No, don't do that. That's true.
So I don't know that.
They
Wait,
don't. It's easy to
no, no, no,
say,
no, no, no.
let's
See,
be empathetic.
so I do the same thing, but not to the person, because I don't want to make a person feel bad about
Sure,
themselves.
sure, sure,
I
sure.
don't think you have evidence that that happens in reality, other than a few videos, right? In which someone says you're not a woman, you're a man. I've seen those videos, but not many of them, like 3.
Yeah, social media is like a viper pit.
So
So
my point is, most people do on the right consider people's mental illness. I do believe that to be true. The problem is when you have somebody that's very obviously a certain sex going into a restroom with their child that's for the other sex, right? And I take issue with that.
so the problem is, yeah, yeah.
I would not allow that
The problem is,
personally.
yeah, when they infringe on, and then there's also the not so small segment where they're using that as a loophole to get access to children, or
Exactly. This is
yeah,
why I would not allow that. I would either say, "Listen, dude," and I would say it very specifically, "Why are you going in the restroom with my 5-year-old daughter?"
right. So are you
Or,
okay with the multi-sex bathrooms? I think
yeah,
that's the way to, that's the
so
solution for it.
so
What
long as they're
California is doing.
so long as they're individual, yeah.
California does it well.
So I have no problems with multi-sex bathrooms,
I'll pee wherever I need to go. And if I have a
so
little
long as
kid,
they're
I'm
individual.
going with them. If I have a daughter, I'm going in the female. I'm taking her
No,
in the
that's
male
not
restroom
how it
with me.
works. That's
Yeah,
not
I'm
how it
taking
works.
her with me in the male restroom.
Exactly. I had to do that too when I was a single father.
Yeah, and nobody cares if a dad
No, if
walks
it's a
in with their
young
daughter.
child,
Yeah,
yeah, that's different than a grown adult going with your daughter into her restroom
correct, correct. But I'm saying the parents are there to
to
take
make the
care of
judgment calls. Yes.
yes, yeah.
And
But
I'm
I'm
saying,
not disagreeing with you at all. I do think it's ridiculous myself, but I'm not closed off to the idea that maybe there will be discoveries in that realm. And then you could argue, well, is that science or scientism? Is that just an agenda? I mean, it never ends, but I want to see empirical evidence that there is a difference. And I don't know if they've measured like brain chemistry of transgenders, if there's like serotonin or dopamine like they can with schizophrenics, and they can do the EEGs now. We're doing some studies where we're running EEGs for depressed people. So I'm sure there's like patterns for people who feel like they're trans. And I also think that there's people that are trans that maybe don't have those patterns, that it's either unexplainable or what about just the curiosity's sake? I mean, let them let them be. I think you had it right when you said like not to make fun of them, but unfortunately, we're so divided. It's almost no one's doing that. Everything's a reason to poke fun at the other side.
So I think compassion should be your first operation.
Yeah,
Secondary to that, I don't think we should lose sight of reality. So the way I do it is true of everything, right? If I meet somebody that's really schizophrenic and cracks
yeah.
me up, I don't do that to their face. I have
But
compassion.
it comes back to philosophy. What is reality? It's a social construct still.
Mm, there's definite truths.
Few.
Well,
We've done a whole pod on this one.
sure, but there are facts, and facts mean truth,
There's
right?
facts right now because they're held strongly in the social fabric.
Well, I
Science
mean,
is meant to be disproven or improved upon.
there's many facts. There's absolutely many facts. You
They're
need
even
oxygen.
saying they're even saying something like gravity, which we consider a fact, is actually electromagnetism.
Okay, do you need oxygen to survive? Yeah. Do you need water to survive?
Fact.
Yeah, I mean, there's facts, right?
There's a
That
few,
are
yeah.
undeniable.
There's a few survival things you
Uh,
need, and
no, I think there's more than a few.
there's nature. Nature is factual. Nature is perfect in its imperfections.
Well, in terms of, I don't know, I guess we're discussing psychology. Um, I think there's facts there too. There's a realm of normal. Outside of the realm of normal becomes
But there
abnormal.
you go. What's normal?
Yeah, I understand that. But generally speaking, most people are not transgender. Most people are not schizophrenic, right? There's a
Correct.
realm of
Correct.
normal.
There's a range. There's a spectrum. A
Yep.
spectrum. Most people are not when it comes to gender. Most people are one or the other, right? Of the sexes.
Hmm.
But there is a range. There's a range of normal, if you want to call it that. So I think gender could be something similar that they just haven't discovered, but people are feeling more confident to speak out. A lot of these, like, this goes back to Nietzsche. A lot of like the stripping down of religion because of science has opened the door for a lot of people to cling on to these kind of issues, social justice or the victim, where or the underrepresented, to where that becomes a new religion because people need to hold on to something. Since religion's kind of been stripped down by science, you have to have faith now to truly be a true believer in religion because science is showing you other alternatives.
Well, that's not
So what's
entirely
the
wait,
faith?
wait, wait. That's not entirely true because there's a lot of science now showing that there's no.
We're losing Chris. It's God himself that has frozen Chris.
I'm back. I don't
We
know if that
lost
was
you.
you or me.
We lost
Yeah.
you, man. I was going solo for a little bit, but go
Well,
ahead.
I wanted to correct that statement.
I'm losing you again.
It's actually the other way around. There's plenty of evidence now showing that there is no other explanation than God for many aspects of science.
Correct. God is not religion.
Oh,
I think we
okay.
can
Fair
agree
enough.
on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay. I
I'm
misunderstood.
talking God is the source of all religion. Now, Christians chose this framework. Islam chose this.
Well,
The Abrahamic faiths chose this. A lot of
yeah,
it's
which
rooted
all of
in
those are
history.
Abraham, right?
All those are
Islam,
Abraham, but guess what
Judaism,
comes before it?
Christianity.
Well, what comes prior to that that no one
Hin-
talks about because it's
Hinduism.
Sumerians.
Okay.
If we lived 2,000 years ago or more, maybe 10,000, we would have been Sumerian. We would have believed in many gods and just like the Sumerians did.
Or the Greeks or
Yeah. The point is,
the
God is not the
Egyptians.
argument. I don't think there's many atheists left in the world, but there are. Most people would agree there's some kind of force. The Stoics said it's the Logos. The Stoics had interesting philosophy because it was actually before Christ when they came up with the theory that the collective consciousness of everyone that has been and to yet to come is the Logos. And when you die, and it's rooted in physics, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only transferred. Your soul leaves your body and goes to join the Logos, which becomes it's basically God, and it was set in motion by God. So God most people would say there is something spiritual. Religion is entirely different. That's a human construct. And you need faith to believe in a religion, whichever one you believe in.
Well, technically, you need faith to believe in God. Is there absolute proof? No.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
science says they cannot explain many things, and the most likely alternative is God.
Well, then why did you argue that's not the case then?
Argue
Before
what?
you went frozen.
I forget what we were talking about. Argue not
You
that.
paused me when I said you need
Oh,
faith. You
because,
disagreed with me, and now you are you disagreed, and now you're saying that's not the case.
what?
Actually,
So there is not definitive proof there is a God. What I'm
right?
saying
And
is,
I said you needed faith to believe in that, and you interrupted and said no, and then I said okay, fine, religion, and now you're saying no, actually you need it for God.
well, I guess what I'm saying is, in the current confines of science, they're saying they have no explanation outside of God for a number of things, right?
Yeah,
But that still isn't necessarily proof. It's
right.
just proof where we currently stand,
Science is progressing closer to it.
right? All I'm saying is, and I guess I'm arguing on your side on that one, is there is no definitive proof that you can say for certain this proves it.
Right,
The argument's closed.
right.
Um,
So my thing is, if we can't even agree on that, how could we possibly agree on like things like gender if it comes up on a spectrum? Sex is one thing, you can prove it empirically, but gender, it becomes more of a spiritual thing at that point.
Well, I like the argument. I know I've quoted this a number of times, and you laugh at me, but I like I like the argument of Mouse Utopia. I really do, because it seems to hold true in the sense that once you have nothing to fight for as a culture or civilization,
Hmm.
you become more mentally ill.
Yeah, we need a purpose. We need things to work on,
Exactly.
things to
Exactly.
fix,
You
things
you
to strive for.
you actually need some sort of danger in your life. Once you become too comfortable, you look
Yeah,
for something to fight for.
you need adventures, but in the absence of that, you get manufactured. You get synthetic dangers, which
Thus,
is
thus
victim
gender,
mentality.
thus gender too. These types of things.
Yeah, but you got to be careful where you categorize what. That's all I'm saying.
Well, this is never an issue when there's other things to worry about.
It still is. It's just not front and center. That's their argument.
Yeah, see, I would disagree with that for the simple reason of, statistically speaking, and I understand this hasn't been tracked for long, but I think for the last like 40 years it's been tracked, like homosexuality and transgenderism, and it's
Yeah,
just seen an explosion in the last 10 years.
but the argument what could be, I'm not an expert in this, that they feel more comfortable now coming out.
Could be.
Before they
I
were
don't
like
believe it,
stoned.
but it
They
could
were
be.
stoned at one point. You couldn't say this shit
Not in
in
America. Come on. Not
in the
not in
world.
America.
In
Yeah,
America,
in the
you would have
rest of the world they
been.
still are. In
Well,
the
they
rest of
burned
the world they
people.
still are.
They burned people during the Salem witch hunt, for less things than saying you're the other
Oh,
gender. So it
so
was
that's
not a
like
tolerant
400 years ago.
society. Well, how
Yeah,
recent do you want to
400
go?
years ago.
How recent
I
do you
just
want to
said
go then?
40 years. I just
40
said 40
years.
years.
Yeah, and that's when they started to be comfortable. After I think it was first the civil rights movement, then women's rights, right? Or in that order. Then it was like the hippie
Other way around.
explosion, like
Well,
drug,
no, I guess it
sexual
is that way.
revolution. Yeah, sexual revolution, birth control. People would say it's was a downward slope for morality, but I mean, who's to make that? Who are we to judge, be moral judges? We're not God. Only God can do that.
Fair enough. But I think nature does it too.
Nature doesn't care about these things.
Oh, it absolutely does. In nature, can two male animals have a baby?
No, but they can have relations and no one's bothering them.
Yeah, but what's the purpose of relation?
It's not to in the animal world, it's not to procreate.
Oh, it absolutely is.
It is, but that's not the only reason.
It's the primary reason.
There's a lot of homosexuality in the animal world.
It's the primary
Of
reason.
course, and in humans too.
Exactly. So that's your norm.
So we're following nature. So let the gay people do what they want, man. I don't get why all these people have to point moral fingers just because their religion says it's not good. That's all
Well,
I'm saying.
Well, again, nature predicates that it is purposeful.
Nature doesn't judge morality at all.
No, it doesn't. But nature
Yeah.
does say if you want to continue with your species,
You need to
you,
procreate, yeah. And humans
exactly.
are doing that. It's maybe not Americans.
No, it's
Humans are doing it. World
most
is
of, no, actually,
exploding.
most of the countries actually, most of the world is actually sloping off. The entire world,
True, including Asian and Arab
even
and
the poorer countries.
yeah. And that's a different podcast. Yeah. But this is a micro, like, in the whole history of humanity, we're just living in like a teardrop of a river.
Yeah, but
Like,
you could argue the reason that we're falling off on self-preservation in terms of procreation has something to do with religion. You could argue that. I don't know if that's
sure
the
you can.
case, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you could argue. Yeah. And I'm open for arguments. Like, my whole thing with this is I'm not a wannabe argumentative person. It's just there's a lot of judging out there, and who's the arbiter of that ultimately? Like, it's not other people.
Well, so
Countries should have laws. I agree. Cities, we're ultimately, if we're all democracy, we should ultimately be representing what's important to us. And if the gays want to, have rights,
well,
then let them,
there's
if
been
they vote for it.
there's been plenty that have argued, and matter of fact, I think most have, that democracy is not the best form of government.
That's the sovereign individual. That's another book. I
But
did a review on that. You know what? That book
but
review
wait,
did
but
good.
a
Shout
republic
out to that.
is the best form of government,
So, like Rome?
like America,
Sure.
because you
And we started this with there's no such thing as free will, because even if you think you have it, you're obeying yourself, which you're obeying your own preconceptions
certainly,
of what you give permission to do.
certainly.
And those preconceptions come from somewhere and not you, because you're not God.
Well, again, I think you have set rules, which again gets back to your argument. You don't have free will if you're going to follow the rule.
But Chris, I love these debates, man. It's not a debate. It's just maybe verbal diarrhea of our thought processes. Well, hopefully people enjoy it. I think this is actually missing from society.
Well, certainly, I think people need to have more open dialogue with one another
Yes,
and constructive conversations, even constructive
Socratic
arguments.
and a Socratic method, like small groups,
Mhm,
12 people in a circle. I think we
mhm.
need to go back to Socrates and those Greek baths, no homo, where they're debating with each other in the
Sure.
baths. Like, would you like wash my balls while we debate this, or it's not okay?
Yeah, that's going a little far. That's quite homo.
Well, we gotta find it on the spectrum where you'd be comfortable, like just being in a bath with me, or like with a underwear, or
Well, we kind of
toga.
do. We kind of do that now, though. I highly doubt these conversations break out. There are swimming pools everywhere, which is kind of the same concept. You're just soap's not involved.
It's important to have fun and not kill each other over, and it's important to challenge ideas. Like, I really hope as I age that I'm still flexible in my framework of thinking. Like, if you can prove me wrong or make a compelling case for me to at least consider that I might be wrong or not entirely correct, I'd actually prefer that over being blindly fed what to believe. And
I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I do. So I think you
I
need to
agree with
be.
your first part. I disagree with your last part.
I think you need to be open to evidence, true evidence, not subjective. I feel this way, so it is. But true evidence. I think you need to have, and I can't think of the word I'm looking for. I think you need to have pillars that are very hard to be brought down, but can on
A framework.
beliefs.
A framework.
There's God, what is the term? There's a
Mental
term.
model.
No, there's a term for this.
Paradigms.
Convictions.
Convictions.
You need convictions. If you have none, then you have no belief system, and you're
Right,
open
right.
to
And
everything.
everyone has. People have too many, honestly.
Well, I think your convictions need to be open to reevaluation, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. The
I mean, you
problem
should
is when
fight for
we,
them. You should fight for them until you see evidence that just you can no longer believe this.
yes, and still be diplomatic in your interactions with others of the
Sure.
opposite, and
Yeah.
and
Like
avoid echo chambers Because what does it being in an echo chamber do? It's just like it's kind of a waste of time. I mean, unless they're your friends, obviously that's not a waste of time because you're spending time with friends. But if they're not your friends and you're just like listening and just over and over hearing the same shit, you're not actually hearing anything else. So you're reinforcing your pillars, which might actually be faulty,
No doubt.
and
And
you're not giving permission for the truth to actually emerge.
I completely agree. Like I said, I've said this to you a few times. I like watching people that I don't necessarily always agree with, but seem to present fact. It makes you question what you believe.
Fair enough. And you could be skeptical when they present the facts, but
Yeah. And I go looking
you,
them up.
yeah, but you should also be skeptical of your own truths. And that's something I started doing not with philosophy, but with my biotech stocks. So AQST, I'm like all in on that, right? And I
Hmm.
don't want to lose all my money. So I'm like looking for ways. I've built my framework of why this is a good investment. And now I'm looking for ways. I'm not looking for like, let's keep propping it up. I'm actually looking for ways where my framework is faulty. Like, where's the weak points? And then
Hmm.
if I find them, I'm like, okay, am I still okay with this investment? Yes, I am. Okay, put more in. Or as soon as I say, no, I'm not okay with it anymore, I need to start selling. And that's on a simple level, like it's a stock.
Hmm.
But I think that thought process should be how we hold all of our values and things we give meaning to. I think that's, and I don't think people do that. I think once people, and in stocks also, when people find a stock that's they're all in, all they do is look for supporting evidence. Yes, 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 this is great, this is great. And that's how sometimes you lose it all.
The unfortunate part, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. Outside of there's more variables than it's a good stock for many different reasons. There's other variables or conditions that affect it that you have no control over.
Right.
So stock is a bad example in that
No,
regard.
no, in a vacuum, like forget the
Okay,
macroeconomic.
in a vacuum, certainly.
And that comes in too. Like, well, what if we get into a Great Depression? Is this still a good investment? Well, no. But what's the likelihood of that happening? Well, not that
Sure,
high. Okay, then it still is.
sure. Or
That's what I think people should look at everything. But
there
how many people actually do? That's the
so
problem.
there's other concessions you have to make outside of just the economy, and that would be the political spectrum. Like for example, the stock AQST is a pharmaceutical.
Love it, man. By the way,
It,
that did
well,
really good on our channel.
so it's a pharmaceutical. Now
It's a biotech.
let's
Biotech.
just say Trump wins and RFK is appointed
Yeah.
to the
It's
FDA
come through. It's
or
come through my mind. It has come through my thought process.
and RFK is saying he's completely redesigning the structure of research for drug approval.
Yep.
Completely.
Yep. Yep.
Does that affect it? And it probably will. Right? So
And
I'm just saying there's other variables too.
I've thought of exactly of this, and it would affect future AQSTs, not current, because there would probably be take years for a plan for an alternative to come into place. By
Mhm,
that point, drugs in the pipeline are already either failed or passed,
mhm.
but it would definitely impact future prospects for AQST, of course.
Well, not only that, but you have to remember you have investors in stocks and they get skittish very easily.
They get skittish too, yeah.
So
But the fundamental,
that
ultimately,
additionally,
I guess the biotech is not a bad way to like bad analogy for life or philosophy because there are fundamental truths about
there are.
AQSD.
There are,
There are
but
drugs that are already approved in
certainly
its portfolio. We cannot deny those. We can deny there's changes to regulations which cause payers to not want to pay as much. And that becomes new evidence, just like in our
sure,
argument about gender or whatever.
sure.
And I would have to be open to it at that point, not just say, no, no, well, this is just the truth, you know. Then you're gonna get caught with
Your
your
pants
pants
down.
down.
Exactly.
And then you'll see what gender I am. So
Fair enough.
that's it, man. Great discussion. At least I hope.
Well, hopefully more than 5 people watch.
Yeah, thanks to the 5 of you watching. We appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, share. We'll make some shorts out of this. Bye bye.